Happy 300, Sadie girl. You already know this, but I am so proud of you. It has been the greatest gift of my life to get to watch you do this. You've been faithful to what God put on your heart. You have done it. You give people so much wisdom, so much truth, so much love and encouragement every single week. I love you. And I love learning for you. And whoa, that's good, baby. Let's keep going.
Congratulations on 300 episodes.
We love you and are so proud of you.
Happy 300th episode, Sadie. We're so proud of you.
We love you so much, and we can't wait for the next 300 episodes.
Hey Sadie, Cherie here. I just wanted to hop on here just to wish you the biggest congratulations on your 300th episode of Whoa, That's Good. So proud of you, so thankful for the wife you are to Christian, the mother you are to Honey and Haven.
Hey Sadie, this is Mama Kay, and I'm so proud of you. 300 episodes, that's a lot of work.
Sadie, 300 episodes. Keep up the good work.
Hey Sadie, we're here to congratulate you on 300 episodes.
Whoa, that's good.
It's amazing. We are so proud of you for all you do, how you influence the world for good, and how you influence us, your family members.
What's up, Whoa, That's Good fam? Y'all, I am so excited for today's episode because today is the 300th episode of Whoa, That's Good, which is crazy. As you can see, we are celebrating here today. We got balloons everywhere. I think, do we have like 300? No, but we do have a 300 sign balloons. We have cookies that are so cute. Our LO team and the Tread Lively team, our production company, has gone all out celebrating today, which is really so special. In August, we hit 6 years of podcasting and now 300 episodes. So much time has gone into this podcast. And honestly, I've loved every single minute of it. I have just absolutely loved podcasting in general, getting to hear people's stories. It's helped me grow so much into who I am as a person. And, I don't know that I would have necessarily thought we would hit 300 episodes and go for 6 years, but I will say I never thought about stopping this whole time because I've just loved it so much, and I still have so many dreams for the future of this podcast and so grateful. But I wanted my mom and Christian to come on today's podcast, and I think in a little bit we might need to switch seats because you're going to kind of be interviewing me this time. But I wanted them to come on because they have been such a huge part of this podcast. For those who have listened since the beginning of Whoa, That's Good, I don't know, you would really have to be an OG to remember this, but I would do like 20 to 25-minute podcast. And then at the end of the podcast, I would call my mom. And this is when I was living in Nashville. And I would ask her, it would be like a segment called Whoa, That's Good or Whoa, That's Bad.
Yeah.
And so I'd be like, Mom, what do you think about this advice? Follow your heart. Whoa, that's good or whoa, that's bad. And then we talk about it. So Mom was such a huge part at the beginning. And then here in more recent years, we started the messy conversations that a lot of you have really resonated with and loved. And then, of course, when Christian came into my life, he is such a big part of the podcast. We've answered so many of your DMs on a regular basis together. And so it just made sense for y'all to be on this episode. And I could have more people here who have been here since the beginning. Steph is somewhere in the building. Steph was my right-hand girl at the time when I said I wanted to start a podcast. And she was like, well, let's Google how we do that and help me get the mic. And now, Mom, your team's taken over and taken it to the next level. But just so grateful that we're here. So grateful to get to do a 300th episode and dream about the future and talk about the past. But maybe we should switch seats.
I think we should, because I have some things that I want to ask you about just, your journey, and also some things I want to tell you. So let's switch.
All right.
Let's switch. All right.
Do I need to move or am I good here?
Reverse.
I think you're good right there.
I was just
You
kidding.
can just
I was
stay
just
right
kidding.
there. You can just stay right there.
She'll interview you
Okay,
too.
before we do anything else, though, I need to tell you that we have a special guest, and he is one of the fan favorites. I don't know if it's like the top episode when he came on, but definitely a fan favorite. And so I wanted to bring him in. You do not know who is coming, but I want to come on in. It's whoever is here that wants to wish Sadie a happy 300. Come on in.
What?
Uncle Si Robertson, the legend himself. The
I saw the
legend
light was
himself.
on. They just told me, hey, go ahead and crash it.
Hey, I'm just constantly trying to keep up with your podcast.
No, I hear that this is your 300th.
This
right?
is my 300.
Okay, well, congratulations.
When Mom said that a guest is about to come in who was one of my top episodes, this is kind of funny, but I was like, Dad, Alan, Si, it's all the men in our family, which is hilarious
That's
because
so
we've had
true.
some big guests on this podcast and like some epic conversations, but you guys are just the fan favorites.
Well, Uncle Si has been one of your biggest fans since the very beginning, so
There you go.
we had to have him on just to say hey
I love it.
and congratulations.
I love it. Thank
What
you
are you
so
doing
much.
these days?
You're looking at it.
Podcast?
I'm doing
I know the
podcasting.
last time I seen you was on the what, K-Love affair?
Oh yeah, I
host?
was hosting.
Yeah.
Yep.
You
I do
did a
a
good
lot
job
of
there.
random things. Thank
Yeah,
you.
I like Willie's deal about, hey, just do your thing, girl.
I know, isn't that sweet?
Yeah.
She's
Yeah.
doing it. She's
Doing my
doing it.
thing. Living original.
All right. Well, thanks for coming in, Si.
Hey, my
Walking
pleasure.
across the hallway from your Duck Call Room podcast and just popping into this one.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
every time I turn around, they're doing something different up here.
Hey, if you're not changing, you're dying.
I guess we're living well.
Well, that's
then.
good.
Word.
Yeah, we're living well then.
That's
Large,
the truth.
as
That's
they
the
say.
truth. Yep. All right. Well, thank you.
Well,
We
I
appreciate you.
appreciate y'all.
Thank
inviting
you,
me.
Uncle Si. I appreciate
Well, this
it.
was an official party crash.
Yes.
So continue on.
All right. Thank
I
you.
genuinely was like, Dad, Alan, which is
Well,
hilarious.
my first thought was like I was already in here, so I was kind of confused at where you were
I
going.
will be honest. My first thought was that you were introducing Christian. And I was like, that's kind of funny because I think people know Christian. And I was like, okay, Dad's about to walk in. And I was like, well, actually, Uncle Alan's podcast is probably the biggest. And then Uncle Si.
Uncle Si. Well, everyone knows he's a fan favorite.
Yeah,
That's
he's a
like
fan
the most
favorite.
common question we get is like, what's Uncle Si doing? Yeah,
yeah.
as if we keep tabs on him at all times.
Yeah,
Like we know
you
what he's doing at
cannot-
all times.
Keep up with that, man.
Okay, so one of the things I wanted to talk about and tell people is just that how much this podcast has impacted people. I know you know that, and people who listen know that because it's probably impacted you. That's why you're listening. But one of the things that, as your mom, that is really special to me that I get to hear literally all over the country, everywhere I go, in airports, in grocery stores, everywhere, is just the impact your podcast has made on people. And this is people all ages, all walks of life. And that's been such a gift. And it never gets old to hear someone tell me. And one of the stories that I love to tell because it just was so impactful to me to hear. We were skiing, we were on the slopes skiing, and this guy comes up and he literally has this like long hair and handlebar mustache turned like this. And he's this like ski instructor dude, you know, and he comes up and he tells me how much our family has impacted him. And he talks about now he duck hunts and he never duck hunted before, but he found a love for that. And just kind of like, you know, about our family and what it has, how it's impacted him. So he walks away. And that's it. And then a little bit later, he comes up and he has his girlfriend beside him and he's like teary-eyed. And like, I noticed, I'm like, okay, something's different this time. So he's like teary-eyed and he says, your daughter, Sadie's podcast has changed my life. He said, it's saved my life. And he said, I just listened to her and I listened to her podcast and her preaching, and I was at a really, really low point in my life, and it changed everything for me.
Wow.
And it was just so beautiful to hear it from him because, yeah, you hear it from girls or you hear it from women or, you know, moms and like, oh, this impacted my daughter. She's in college or whatever. But to hear it from someone that I would not have expected necessarily. So you have no idea.
that.
You have no idea who all you're impacting with this podcast. So thankful that you said yes to doing it years ago and you just had that dream and that little idea, but you didn't just leave it as an idea. You actually did it. You got with Steph and were like, hey, how do we do this? And y'all figured it out. And it's been so beautiful to watch you figure it out along the way and do it over and over again. And one of the things I remember talking to you about early in those days of doing it is just how it's like, it's really part of it is just keep going.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times people start things. A lot of people have ideas.
Yeah.
And a lot of people start things. But to continue going 300 years in.
300 years?
300 years. to continue going 300 episodes and you're still going strong, and you're doing it with joy and wisdom and humility and all that. So I'm very, very proud of you.
Thank you so much. That means a ton. And obviously, I couldn't have done it without you for a million reasons, which I know we're going to get into probably when we shifted to you kind of taking over and helping with it more. But I'm so grateful. And I remember that guy because he came up to us when I was there, but then he didn't say any of that. And then he came back up to you later and told you that. So it really is cool how you never know who it's touching or impacting. And man, those stories like never get old because, you know, you see like a number of downloads, but you don't know the people or the names behind that. And that's a unique thing about podcasting, different from social media. It's not like there's a place that you comment and you see it. It's just this many people listened, and you just pray and hope that God moved in their life. And then to get to run into those people along the way, at the airport, on the trips that we're on, at lunch, like it's very special.
That's so awesome. All right, Christian, can you tell us, like, we need some little behind the scenes of like, what's it like with Sadie doing this podcast? How have you seen it impact her? How has it impacted your life? Just give us the insider scoop.
Well, I will say it's been cool. You know, so we've been together for the last 6 years. So even just the progression.
Yeah, I actually started the podcast the month Christian and I went on our first date.
Yeah.
So it's the same.
I did not realize that. That's amazing.
But I was saying it's been cool seeing the progression of people recognizing you from the show to now like podcasting.
Yeah.
So it's like 90% of people that come up, it's instead of Duck Dynasty, it's the podcast, which has been cool. But yeah, a little insider scoop. No, it's been, I mean, you know, even talking pre-podcasting about like the mixed pre-3 before of like traveling with, you know, the little briefcase that's indestructible throughout the airport and making sure that everything's intact to now actually having a team that, you know, facilitates everything. But it's been cool to see the preparation be the same for you and treating it with as much weight, you know, as you did early on, as you do now. And that's the thing that I'll say sometimes it's cool that like people don't necessarily realize, you know, how much work on your end goes into it. And just how your heart is still so pure in it. And I've seen you, you know, truly take wisdom that people give you on the podcast of like, well, it's good advice. Yes, it speaks to all the listeners, but it also speaks to you. Mm-hmm. And like you cherish, you know, you cherish the advice just as much as everyone else does. And you actually, you know, try to follow it and live it out. So it's been cool to see that of, like, you know, the progression of people recognize you for the podcast and just the impact that that's had on people. And, just seeing behind closed doors and how much you pour into it and actually how much it impacts you. So
that's so sweet.
It's been cool.
Well, I just thought about this, which is really cool because I know the first day the episode with Bob Goff came out, which is our first episode ever. And it was the same day as our first date. We didn't record it that day, but that's when it came out. So literally the podcast has been going since our first date, which is actually so weird. I've never thought about that.
I never thought about that.
Isn't that weird?
No, I did not know
to
that.
the day. Because I just thought about that. We've never thought about that. And I was like, wait a second. That was our first date day. And I haven't put it together because we recorded it obviously before and then just put it out. Yeah. And then I guess I was just, sometimes when big things go out, I'm just, you know, doing my thing or you're just kind of distracted by life.
So cool.
And that's crazy. That's cool.
Well, that's the point of like celebrating things because it makes you think back and be like, oh, that happened. And
that's
that happened.
Really
and
cool.
See the faithfulness of God and all of that. I feel like that happens so much with your podcast. Like because you know, you listen to it in the car while you're like cleaning out your closet or, you know, while you're doing something else generally. But I always am like, oh no, I've got to go back and listen when I can write down. Because there are always so many good little nuggets. Yeah. I love that so much. Okay, so tell me this. You know how like at dinner at night, when you sit around the table, you do highs and lows. So I thought I'd love to hear, like, what would you say are your highs and your lows of doing a podcast?
Okay, let me think about that. Because there has been a lot of episodes, obviously, in a long time, 6 years. I would say one of the highs of doing the podcast has been that the past 6 years of my life have been, you know, big 6 years. Like I met Christian at the very beginning of this, and then we got married and we've had Honey and Haven. And to have so much of that time like documented in video of like what I was learning during that time. And even like we've had the girls on the podcast. I had Christian come on and like be introduced on the podcast. I think that that's really special. It's something I haven't looked back on and like seen the progression of. But now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, oh, that's all there.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking about moments where like I really needed to hear what someone said, because I remember when I started back working, but I remember this was a really significant moment for me because I just started back working and I was feeling like a lot of just being overwhelmed by everything going on and just the mom guilt. And
Are you going to say Lisa Bevere?
Yes. And more just like exhaustion. And I had Lisa Bevere on the podcast and she just started speaking like to my heart.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's a moment in interviews where I feel like I come on, I'm ready to interview someone. And there are moments where I just go, okay, I'm just actually going to receive what they're saying and not think about where we're going, but just like be in the moment, which is scary because then you're vulnerable because then you don't know what's going to come out next. Like I might share something I didn't want to share too much or whatever. But I was like, I'm just going to let it happen. And that was, I think, maybe one of the first podcasts I guess made me cry, where I just sat there and I just let it happen and was like, I needed this. And I know so many people listen to this podcast and have this moment, and I'm going to let myself have this moment. And so that was just really special for me.
That's
so
good.
high of like, man, I've learned so much from this, and I've learned so much in such pivotal moments in my life. And I think it's made me a better wife. It's made me a better mom. It's made me a better person. Not from like doing it, but from listening to like and being a part of these conversations. It's just made me so much better.
Good.
So that's a high.
And one thing that I want to say to you, and this is something that I feel like I have learned from you over the years as a teenager and going into adulthood and all that. One of the things I always say is like your superpower is your vulnerability and your ability to like actually tell somebody that something that you're going through and let them speak into your life. I think for a lot of us, it's like can be scary to like say, oh, I'm struggling with becoming a new mom and I don't really know how to do this and how to work and how to do this. But instead, we still try to just like act like we've got it all together and try to figure it out. But one of the things you've done from a young age is you would say like, hey, I'm struggling with this. And you say that to people who you know can speak into your life. And then you listen and you take it and you learn from it. And that's something that I've seen you do and I've learned from. I've become more open to people.
That's
like
cool.
whenever I'm going through something, if I'm around anybody who I think can speak into it, I'm like, I'm going to tell you. I'm like, hey, I'm
the
doing
best
this right
thing.
now.
Yeah.
And I just think that that is such a gift. And I think what you've given to the listener is modeling that and showing that. And so this, this instant
cool.
that you said that as your high, this instance is exact model of that.
That's cool. Just to the point of documenting too, like we've had Mama Joe on and Tu Mama and Tu Papa and Mama Kay and like Uncle Si and all these, like I just feel like that's so special that we got to have not only just them, but them speaking their best advice, you know, like that's so special.
That's so good.
If you've followed me for a while now, then you know that I love spending time in prayer, journaling, writing in my Bible, because yes, I am a doodler. There's just something about writing it down, no matter how you're feeling, and just making it personal in your own journal or in your Bible. Whenever I'm deep into my journal, I rely on Mr. Pen supplies to help me line it all out, whether I'm working on a new message for an event or just praying for those that I love. Mr. Pen is a Christian company dedicated to making pens and highlighters specifically to be used in your Bible, which if you are a Bible reader, you know that there actually is a difference. Like if you're writing in your Bible and you don't have something like this, it bleeds through. It's kind of hard, to read the next page because you did it. But these pens don't bleed through those super thin pages. And with over 100,000 5-star reviews, I am not the only person who loves Mr. Pen products. No matter where you are at in your journey, Mr. Pen is there for you, whether that's just taking notes in school or a sermon, whatever it looks like for you, or tabs to hold on to those special verses. These are actually maybe my favorite products from Mr. Pen because they're magnetic tabs. And especially whenever I'm speaking, it's so nice to hold the place of where I'm flipping to, because I used to like put a paper in it, a little bookmark, and then I'd be speaking and then fall out on stage. If you see me speak, you've probably seen that before, but no more because I have magnetic tabs. They really have thought of it all when it comes to reading and journaling. So stock up on your Mr. Pen's Bible journaling supplies today. Visit sadiepens.com and be sure to check out my favorites at sadiepens.com to get all your Mr. Pen Bible journaling supplies. You will be so glad that you did.
And this morning, as I was like thinking about this and praying about it, I marked 3 scriptures that just came to mind, and one of them is Romans 12:1, and it just says, "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect." And that scripture just came to mind today because I was thinking about, yes, doing something like this, putting out 300 episodes over 6 years' time takes sacrifice. There is a piece of it that is sacrifice. That it's I am offering this up. I'm offering what I have, what God gave me, the gifts He gave me, and my time to Him, to do something for Him. And that's what you've done in this. And what it's done for all of us who've been able to listen is we've been able to be transformed, renew our minds, to listen to the advice and the things that are shared. So I thought about that verse this morning, and Christian mentioned it, and because he sees that sacrifice as well. So I think that's a beautiful thing.
Really cool. That's beautiful. I love that. Yeah, it's so cool because there's been so many hours put into it. And you know what's crazy though? You know how it's it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something? Even with 300 episodes of hour-long episodes, I'm so far away from 10,000.
What was that thing you said one time? You thought you were past 10,000 hours.
I've got to be at 10,000 hours by this point, just because it feels like it. There's these are long episodes, not to mention all the prep work.
That's what I'm saying.
That goes into it.
The hours are not just what you see here.
It's the prep work. That's the longer.
Reaching out and asking, "Hey, will you be on my podcast?"
It's the
reading the books, watching the
interviews, watching the videos that people put out. Which now I have an amazing girl who helps me read the books and prep and all the things. But that's a lot of time. And so
I think you might have hit 10,000.
But whenever I just added up the episodes, I was like, how was I not even close to 10,000 hours? So it's amazing, how much, yes, it's been a lot of time, but how, man, there's still so much time to put into it, and there's so much learning, and there's so much, even now, I'm still constantly learning and pivoting and trying new things, and it's really fun.
10,000 hours works out to be around 20 hours per week for 10 years. So you're going to be there soon.
10 years. I'm at 6 years. So
4 more years.
Yeah,
you'll be an expert.
Maybe that's when we'll start the talk show.
Perfect. All right. You want to share a low? What would be your low?
Yeah, a low.
I would say some of the sacrifice moments probably. Of
expand.
Huh?
I said expand.
You mean expound upon that?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Expand, expound. Well, you say expand, I say expound.
Tomato.
Yeah, the moments where, because not only do you do podcasting, you also run a ministry and you're a boss. Not you are a boss like that, but you're a boss is in you manage people, you are a boss in both ways. But no, I think, podcasting, not solely only what you do. So, sacrifice from the standpoint of just time and, with the girls, and there's moments where, you don't want to stay up late and study or get up early and study because one of the kids didn't sleep at all during the night, so we're exhausted. And it's we've been traveling. I don't want to come do the podcast. Even, after you go speak somewhere, you're on the plane studying, and it's I don't, so I think sacrifice from those low moments of, when you talk about wanting to quit, it's those days where it's
just those hard moments of because this podcast isn't seasonal, it's every Wednesday, every other Monday. And so it is every Wednesday is going to keep on coming, and so you got to have an episode. So there's moments where we've gotten behind and we've had to cram. And then there's just moments where interviews felt harder than others, or the prep work took longer than it should have, or the kids didn't sleep and I'm tired and I'm still getting up or staying up. And so I think alongside my high being that it's kind of gone with me, the lows have been in those seasons where I had a baby, you know, and we've kept the podcast going. That's been kind of hard to sustain. But you have stepped in and helped be a guest host. You stepped in. We had a moment where John Luke stepped in and guest hosted for me. And so I've had a team of people help me. And that's the thing. A lot of times when people say like, I want to do what you do. And I'm like, I love that. I love that. You want to do this because I love what I get to do. But you have to have a good team. Like it is me on the camera, but there are so many people behind the scenes helping make this happen. And there are so many people who step in on camera sometimes to help make it happen when I can't. And so I truly could not have done this without like the army of people around us. And so I do always want to say it to people who are like, I'm going to start doing that. And I'm like, you should. And it's awesome. But here's my advice. Do seasonal, pre-record all your episodes, you know, do as much prep work as you can and don't put expectation to what it needs to be and all the different things because it's a journey. It's very hard.
And I would say too, like, persevere to the point where you do have a team, because at first it wasn't.
I didn't have a team
you
at
didn't
first,
have that. I do think a lot of people are like, oh, I'm waiting on my team to all come around me and make this happen. But there are the kind of like the early, sometimes lonely days of like, okay, it's me in my room with my microphone and it's me sending all the emails and it's me doing all that. So yes, the team is what has allowed you to do this for this long and continue on. But there is that kind of starting part. Don't be afraid to start small. Like just.
Well, for me, like starting small was, not having a huge team at first. It was like me, Steph, and Court. And Court was doing the website and stuff. And Steph was helping with the podcast, but also doing a lot of other things. And so it was me with my little mix P3, press and record, stopping the recording button, doing the thing, which was great and everything. And then for a couple years, didn't get paid for it, just did it because I loved it. And then eventually got, some help with like advertisement and different things like that, which was huge and amazing. But then there's sacrifices of growing a team and paying people for things. And so it's just a bigger thing than I think people realize when it's like, oh, I'm just going to start a podcast, It's like, if you look at where we're at now, it took 6 years to get here, it just takes time.
I think one of the things that has struck me about your podcast and over all this time is just the different conversations you've gotten to have with people who've had a lot of loss or people who've experienced real trauma, and then also, fun podcasts and all that. So how do you feel about just kind of hearing people's stories and getting to share those stories with the world?
Yeah. I think one of the reasons I started this podcast was for people to be able to share their story in a safe space and feel like their story was treasured, that their story wasn't something that I was trying to use for a headline or use to my advantage, but it was a place for them to share their story from their heart and their voice. And that came from us, with Duck Dynasty and James with the Stars being interviewed so often after an interview, seeing a headline go up that I was like, what? That is not even what I said. That doesn't even reflect what the conversation was, or it was one sentence of what I said out of the context of how I said it, and it would be frustrating. And then I would be like, okay, if someone didn't even read the article and they just saw that headline and they just created their own story for what that was. And so I wanted a safe space to share my stories in the way that was protected by my own heart. And okay, if you want to hear what happened to Sadie on this day, before you go to any other news channel, go to her podcast and listen to it, And so, which has been a gift for me over the years with different things we've gone through. But I wanted that for other people too, like a Luke Bryan, to say hey, come on here. I want to ask you your story. And one, I want you to know I value it and treasure it. And, I think it's amazing. I'm going to shout you down and say, well, that's good. But also, other people get to hear your heart in maybe a way that they don't typically whenever you're on American Idol or doing your typical interviews. And then also just people who aren't well known, whose stories should be heard, who have stories of overcoming something, who have stories of just powerful testimonies, who have, funny stories or good things. And I'm like, you should come on the podcast and share that, because it's a great story and it's going to impact other people. And so many people can find their story through yours. I heard a story yesterday about my friend Lydia, who's been on the podcast several times. She shared her story about being wild in college and then going to Passion Conference and that changing her life. Well, this girl was listening who was living a wild college life, and she was like, okay, this girl was living the same lifestyle as me. She went to Passion and something happened for her. So that girl listened to the podcast, buys her ticket for Passion, goes to Passion Conference, gives her life to the Lord. Then, because she heard in the podcast, Lydia went to started working for FCA. She got involved with FCA, and so then she started doing missions through FCA. Through a series of wild events, she gets to meet Lydia, and then Lydia baptized her. Like, how crazy is that? So,
That's amazing.
Lydia's story wasn't well known, and she was on the podcast, and all of a sudden, it impacts so many people. And now Lydia's baptizing someone from South Dakota. And so it's that's the power of just these conversations and these stories. And sometimes when you hear someone else's testimony and you see how God moved in their life, you go, oh, God can do that in my life. And that's the point of bringing on these different voices and hearing their stories. And then sometimes the podcasts are simply to pass on a resource. Maybe someone's book was man, people are going to be impacted by this. Let's interview the author. And then it leads to people reading that book, and then that changes their life.
Yeah.
And then that's so amazing.
That's so good.
It's
Do
good.
you have something?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I was just saying that.
It's so
He was
good.
just over there saying, well,
I know,
that's
he
good.
was just shouting you down.
I was just saying, well, that's
You
good.
didn't even hear that story about Lydia yet, did
No,
you?
I didn't.
Yeah, that happened yesterday.
That's really cool. I
That's
haven't heard that.
amazing. Well, I love podcasting because of that. The ability to have a long conversation and really get to hear from somebody and sit down across, you're sitting down across or sitting down across from a screen and you're listening to a full conversation rather than that sound bite or even that just Instagram post or even that, that little bit. You can look at somebody's Instagram page, or you can, if someone's famous, read an article about them and form an opinion. But to sit down and actually get to really hear their heart and listen to the things they've been through, it just changes things.
It does. And I've had one of my favorite things is when the podcast ends, and I've had so many guests say thank you so much for caring about my story. I can tell you really read the book. I can tell you really watched the movie. Or I can tell that you really invested yourself in my life. Or, man, I've been in a press day all day, and I've been interview after interview, and this one was so refreshing because it wasn't just the stereotypical press questions that you were asked to ask me. You cared about my heart. And it's just amazing, when you care about someone's heart. And so I hope also with this podcast that maybe it's giving people an example of how to ask people good questions and be intentional about hearing people's stories, because everyone wants to be known. Everyone wants, even if they're scared of it, you do, and you feel valued when you are. Yo, it is crazy how big of a difference you can tell in yourself whenever you're actually hydrated. So whether you've been sick or just, live an active lifestyle, Element is here for you. Element is a tasty drink mix with no sugar, artificial flavorings, or any shady ingredients. Every pack delivers a meaningful dose of what your body needs and nothing that it doesn't. When we sweat, whether we are sick or working out, the main electrolyte we lose is sodium. And if we don't replace that sodium or other electrolytes, then we can experience headaches, fatigue, muscle cramps, and more. Anybody else felt that? I definitely have. Element helps you avoid all of those nasty symptoms and gives you a dose of electrolytes that your body craves every day. Element is used by everyone from podcast hosts to U.S. Special Forces teams to Olympics and professional athletes to just people living their best life every day. And now you can enjoy the same zero sugar electrolyte formula that you know and love from Element, but in a can of tasty sparkling water. I actually have one right here so you can guys see how cool the can is. Element Sparkling gives us an all-new option to hydrate without giving our money or time to sugar and stimulant-loaded drinks. It is a great alternative if you guys love something bubbly or, you love energy drinks. I think this is a great alternative. Obviously, it doesn't have the caffeine, but it's just so good for your body. It makes you feel so good and kind of has that similar taste. Right now, Element is offering a free sample pack with any purchase. That's 8 single-serving packets like I have right here. It's a great way to figure out what flavor you love. That's going to be free with any purchase. So Christian and I actually have different favorites, so I think the sample pack is amazing because then you can actually try them all out. I personally love the watermelon and the raspberry. No shock, I love the pink flavors. And Christian is obsessed with these sparkling waters, so he absolutely loves them. He's got to have one every day. You guys are going to love it, so definitely use this code because then you can try it all. So be sure to try Element Sparkling. It's a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water and claim your free sample packs today. Visit drinkelement.com/whoa. Again, that's drinkelement, DRINKLMNT.com/whoa. I remember whenever I started the podcast and I was living in Nashville, I was like living like kind of with one roommate, and then again, like back to the before you have a team thing, like when you're just really trying to figure out why you're doing what you're doing and like just fully believing in something and going for it. And I read this verse and I was like, this is going to be the verse of the podcast. And I put this, and like, it's not the verse of the podcast, as in no one even knows this but me. Like I wrote this on a piece of paper and put it in my closet.
Verse of the podcast.
This is the secret verse of the podcast. I wrote it down on a piece of paper, put it in my closet. And it says, make a tree good and its fruit will be good. Or make a tree bad and its fruit will be bad. For a tree is recognized by its fruit. And then it goes on to say, you brood of vipers, how can you who are evil say anything good? And this verse, for the mouth speaks what the heart is full of. So that, I'm going to keep going, but that was my verse for myself. Yeah. Like if the tree is good, then its fruit will be good, and it's going to be recognized by its fruit. My mouth is going to speak what my heart is full of. And so I wrote that as a prayer for myself in my closet and thought, okay, if I'm going to have a microphone and interview people and I want it to be called Boy That's Good and be good, then like my heart has to be good. Then I go on to read this. A good man brings good things out of the good stored in him, and an evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in him. But I tell you that everyone will come to the day of judgment and be account for every empty word they have spoken. For by your words you will be... How do you pronounce that? Acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. And then I started praying for my guests every time they come on the podcast that I would bring up the good that's stored in them, that that's the good treasure that's in their heart I would bring up, I would ask them about, I would like provoke it to come out. And that is like such a good scripture for this whole podcast, because it's like your words matter. Every word you say matter, and whatever is in your heart, your mouth is going to speak of, your mouth is going to say. And I just love how it says good so many times, and our podcast being, whoa, that's good. So that was like a prayer. And I do want to say too, like if for anyone like thinking, I'm going to start a podcast or want to do a podcast, like make sure you know your why and like take the time to establish why you're doing what you're doing and what it's going to be. Because I think way before we even started Whoa, That's Good, we were dreaming of why we would do a podcast and what it was going to be. And this was before people really did podcasts. Like now it feels like everybody has a podcast. Then I only really knew Annie Downs, who had a podcast. And I remember whenever I told people I had a podcast, they would say, I don't have that app on my phone. And I would go, yes, you do. Everybody has a podcast app. You just gotta get, like, no one knew even how to find it, what it was, what kind of platform that was. So I always remember it felt like new territory. But again, like before you do something just to jump on a train, like make sure you know your why, what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish. And I think it's really cool that, like Christian said, the whole vision has stayed the same for 6 years. So and it's yes, things have added to it. It's become a little bit different in some different areas with better mics, better studio, different things. But that verse is still completely accurate to where we're at now. Mm-hmm. And I think if I had veered off too far from that, I probably wouldn't be doing it anymore. You know? Yeah.
Someone said to me the other day, commitment comes from conviction. Mm. And so thinking about that, like once you are convicted about your mission and what you want, then the commitment follows. Then you feel committed to it and you're going to stick with it. Yeah. But if you don't really have conviction about anything, you don't really know your why or what's your point, then you're not going to stay committed to it. So
yeah, you got, and that's the thing. If you're going to do something like this, where every Wednesday does roll around, you know, and it is a lot of hard work. Even though I love it so much, it is a lot of hard work. You got to know your why, and you got to feel convicted. If I didn't know my why and feel convicted by it, I would have quit when I had honey, because it didn't make sense to keep doing it with how, like at the time I was like, okay, if I'm going to do this and I need guest hosts, I need y'all to come in, I need to do this, we got to keep it going. And then I came back in weak and like feeling like overwhelmed. And then that would have been the time I would have quit. But conviction makes you go, no, don't quit. Like Lisa said, don't get too comfortable. Like there's something here that people need and that you need, you know.
That's good.
That's great. I'm going to read a few encouraging comments. There's like 50 here, so I'm going to choose a couple of them.
Sweet. Where'd y'all find these? Instagram?
Yep.
That's so sweet.
Yes, Instagram. Okay, one, this podcast has changed my life, and my friends and I have even started a small group watching the podcast together and discussing.
That's so cool.
That's very
sweet.
Aww. I turned to the podcast when I was walking through one of the hardest things I've ever been through, when I couldn't bear to listen to anything else. Wow. This one's cool. Such an authentic model of how to live in the light of Christ. Authenticity is your word. So that was cool. You then even like practical things like this one's cool. This podcast has helped me overcome my eating disorder.
Wow.
And I finally started my online ministry after hearing you say, start with your friends with what you have.
Yay, that's so cool.
Those are so good.
That's
Cool little
awesome.
nuggets that
I love that.
from the
Thank
longer
you.
list.
It is like really sweet to read those because again, I actually don't like read that. Like I don't see that, you know, and so that is like really encouraging.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Those encouraging words are important because sometimes when you're in the spotlight and you're doing a lot, you do also hear the discouraging words. So those encouraging words are so good. And like I said, as a mom, I get to hear that all the time because people come up to me and tell me what it means to them. But to see them written down and people took the time to write and let you know what they, what they've learned from you and what they've learned from this podcast is special.
It's very special.
All right. One of the special things we've gotten to do is our messy conversations.
Love it.
And the very first one we did, we didn't have a name. We weren't calling it a messy conversation. We just sat down because we felt like we needed to talk about a topic.
Which one was our first one?
I think it was the tattoo one.
Oh, yeah.
Because we were getting, because of those.
Speaking of, you have a nice little rainbow tattoo from my daughter right now.
I do.
Would this be up for discussion or is this like,
Why didn't I get one?
does this cause controversy?
Let me see. What is yours?
Mine is a rainbow sea.
I have a rainbow in my hand.
I love it.
So, yes. So tattoos. And that was one. The reason we did it is because of the discouraging comments that we were getting. People were asking and commenting on the fact that we got tattoos and also genuinely asking and wanting to know, like, how do you feel about this? I've been taught that this was wrong. And so it led to, we thought, okay, we'll just sit down and have a conversation about it. And we're like, it's going to be messy because we don't really know.
Because these conversations are messy. Because right before we did this podcast, in real life, I had a conversation with someone who didn't think it was right to get tattoos. And it was a messy conversation. Yeah. And we left both feeling the same way in our conviction that I felt that it was okay based off scripture and things I read, and she felt it wasn't. And so I remember coming into this podcast, you being like, hey, just so you know, like, this might be messy. Yeah. And I love that we titled it that because it gave grace for the fact that this is not like saying this is the answer, but this is what we believe.
Yeah. And if you haven't listened to our messy conversations, that is something if you want to go back to, because we always try to just like bring our Bibles to the conversation and really study scripture and be open to like, hey, maybe we've seen this wrong and we need to look at it another way.
Friends, there is a growing epidemic in our churches and in our communities of young women with pornography. We don't always think about young women in the church when we talk about these problems with porn, but in 2016, a study found that 1 in 3 Christian women struggle with pornography use. In the years that have passed, our culture has gotten only more self-indulgent and more young women are falling prey to the trap of porn. But thanks to Covenant Eyes, no one has to be in that struggle silently or alone anymore. Covenant Eyes is excited to introduce a brand new resource made for women by women. It's actually called Arise. It's a free 21-day video series designed specifically to reach Christian women. Arise is a way for women to overcome their addiction and start walking down the path of sexual healing. It's a safe, confidential community of women where your story and your struggle matter. With Arise, women struggling with porn will see that they are not alone, that there is hope and there is freedom waiting for them. Crafted by Covenant Eyes experts, Arise offers guidance in things like identifying your triggers, exploring childhood traumas, and understanding how your body cycle even affects your addiction. I think this is absolutely amazing what they're doing. I think the biggest thing I've heard from testimonies of people struggling with porn, especially women, is that they were just so afraid to tell someone because they were afraid that, people might look at them like they're dirty or weird or whatever. And friends, it's just like a struggle. It's a sin like any other, and you need help and you need to confess it with a friend. And man, if you have a community around you, you really can find freedom in Christ. So experience hope and freedom like never before with Arise. Get this resource completely free by scanning the QR code on your screen or visiting ariseforwomen.com. Again, that's ariseforwomen.com. I love our messy conversations. They've been so good. Like each one though that we approach, I'm always like, ooh,
I know,
Like,
me too.
whenever we did the messy conversation about cancel culture with like Disney, and because people were hating on me and Christian for taking our girls to Disney last year, and then also, yes, it got a lot of hate, but some people genuinely like, hey, I don't know why you would do this because all these reasons, and then we got to like talk about it, and so it actually has like opened up the door for some really cool conversation, and we do value your feedback. Like when you send encouraging comments, they mean a lot, and then when you ask questions, I'm like, what do I think about that, or let me address that, and so that's been cool.
And that's kind of how we've taken it. We're like, okay, we're not necessarily like gonna answer every hater or whatever, but people who come and have genuine, that's the thing, like, a lot of it is
curious.
They're genuine conversation and questioning, like, hey, how do you see this? Or why do you see it this way? Or I love you, but I see it differently. So I want to hear. And those are conversations that we have like around our dinner table and in the car ride or on the phone. So we're like, okay, how about we sit down and just have it with a microphone?
Right.
And that's been really fun. That's been a gift.
So good. I love
All right. Another really fun thing, part of it over these last 6 years, has been Christian coming into it, and y'all have done a lot of like answering DMs and answering questions and that kind of things.
Were you nervous when you first started coming on the podcast, or did you always just step in with confidence?
I can't remember the first time I was on. I don't think I've.
I don't think you have either. Every time Christian's like, if your ratings start dropping, just let me know. I'll come back on.
In like a sarcastic tone. I'm never being serious.
Sometimes Christian does get roasted on this podcast because
I get roasted off.
Yeah, because it's his humor that people just don't catch through the camera.
No, people that don't understand. It's too sophisticated for a lot of people.
If you're carrying the football, you're going to get tackled. That's what we've said for a very long time. If you're carrying the football, you're going to get tackled. Someone's going to try.
How many tackles am I going to break? Whoa, that's good.
You're like,
sometimes you got to juke out. Sometimes you got to juke, and
that's right.
Or do I fumble? You know.
I think you know who you are, so you're not really worried about.
Yeah, no, I'm not for sure.
That's right. Yeah. Well,
I
like we
juke
always
them
say.
all out, and then I score.
Christian does love to score.
See, now you're gonna get roasted. This is the problem.
This is why.
But just know we roast him first.
Oh yeah, that's the truth.
I'm joking.
He can take it too. Yeah.
Sometimes. Not often. I'm not the best at getting roasted.
You're not the best.
So sometimes it actually does hurt my feelings.
How about the times whenever you have come back on social media?
Christian?
Yes.
Oh, I know.
It's only happened 3 times in 6 years. It's not a bad ratio.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
It's 2 times actually. 1 on YouTube, 1 on Instagram. And it was defending Sadie, not me.
I know. Well, that's the thing. You know that happened to me early on too.
So
I will tell you.
Proud of me for defending.
I'm very proud of you, and I will say I have experienced that because like I could not care less what people say about me. Like whatever. Like I know who I am. I don't care. But there was a time when people were roasting Dad. Willie online. And this was back in the days of like chat room kind of thing, and we had like this like chat room on Duck Commander. It had this like Duck Commander chat space or whatever. And people were roasting him, and like I just could not take it any longer. And so I made a comment.
Yes.
And I did.
That makes me feel so much better.
And I will say those people came back and like apologized. Because
actually that happened with Christian.
Yeah.
The one YouTube thing that happened, this guy like did a whole video about me. But like it made it, the way that he did the video with the headline, like his title made it look like I was like a false prophet. Like it was crazy. And then when you watch the video, it didn't, like there was nothing that no evidence. Like he was like all the things alluding to. And so Christian commented and was like, hey, this is really damaging, like, and kind of like made this whole comment about you don't know her heart. And he deleted the video.
Good for you, Christian.
I know, and it was like a big video. I know.
Good for you.
See, so 2 times I've had to clap back in 6 years. It's not bad.
That's not bad.
It's not bad.
That's good. That's not bad.
I'll take that
and
ratio.
when it's defending your wife, it's
when it could be like
that's right.
1,000. Like there's been
when you hold your tongue.
I've held it like 998 times, but 2 times I've let it fly.
Okay, I want to end with. Is there anything else that you feel like you need to say?
One other thing I was thinking about with the highs of all this, has been meeting the people. And I know like we've alluded to that and said that, but like truly, when people come up to me, and I think used to back in the day with Duck Dynasty, when people came up to me in public, it felt like a little weird, you know, he's like taking your picture, and I was like young, and I didn't love that, you know, to be honest. But now when people come up to me and they hug me and tell me like, your podcast has meant so much, or they tell me about a story of an episode that they listened to or whatever, like it actually has been like so fulfilling, because that's why we do it. You know, it's for people to actually be impacted. And I will say one thing with like, even just like the listens and stuff, because I think so many times like we deem success based off of like the numbers of things. And when the podcast started, it did well, and then it grew and it grew and it grew, and it continued to do well. And then after I think it got like really big, and then it dipped some, and then it will go back up, and then it'll dip some. And there have been like, you know, seasons of that. There's 300 episodes. That's gonna happen. And I think like one thing with this podcast I have been very serious about is I will not ride that like the emotions of like I'm not gonna feel disappointed in any episode of this podcast because a number was lower than another.
That's good.
And even if a group of them are lower than another. I told our team this, Tread Lively this, you know, even with like ads and stuff, I was like, this podcast was never started for like to make money. It was started to impact people. And so if this podcast is being listened by people and people are being impacted, then that's success to me. And I'm proud of that. And I just don't want to ever feel disappointed in a podcast because it didn't like perform as well in numbers, but it impacted that many people.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's freed this podcast up into having people come on who aren't as well known, and maybe their story isn't going to reach quite as many people, but some of those have been, I think, the most impactful in people's life. And I think back in the day, like early on, before even podcasting, just in other things in life, I would kind of deem what was successful by the numbers. And if it didn't do well, I'd feel disappointed, and I could have done more, and I should have done this, and I should have done that. And I don't even let myself feel that with this podcast. It feels too, and I don't mean to say holy and like, because that's the wrong word, but it feels set apart. It's like, it's not about anything other than the impact that's really making on people, and God's using it in such a mighty way that I don't want to get in the way of that. And I'm not going to let my like human fleshliness get in the way of that. And so, it's so significant to me. It's different than anything I do. And I take that really seriously, the impact that we're making, not just like the amount of people we're reaching. And that's blown me away. I mean, for a long time we kept up with it, and we'd be like $40 million, $100 million. I mean, it was like crazy. And it was all about that. And it still reaches a crazy amount of people I never thought we'd reach. And some episodes are still the biggest episodes. Like last month we posted one that's one of the biggest ever. But I'm like, it really is about the impact. And I just wanted to say that because that's been something, a mindset shift in me from when I was younger to where I am now, even though I'm still 27, that has been a big shift for me.
That's so good. And it is really intimate, because there a lot of times when you're listening to a podcast, that's a one-on-one thing. Like you're listening to it like in your bathroom, in your kitchen. So there's an intimacy that comes with podcasting that can impact you differently. I think maybe even like we talk about, you know, when you're on a stage, and you get to do that too, to where you're talking to, you know, tens of thousands of people sometimes at once. But there is kind of an intimacy involved in podcasting that's special.
Protecting the integrity of that. And even like, because I think if you do something for the success of like numbers of the world, that tempts you to do like, you know, clickbaity, like those kind of get you things. And it's like I said from the beginning, this is to treasure people's story. This is to honor people's story. And if there's ever a title that's clickbait, it's something we actually said and talked about, you know? Yeah. And so I think it's just, I've been so intentional about my heart not to get distracted by the hustle of like, rankings, numbers, this and that, especially since so many more people are in that space now, I support those other ones because I know the impact they're making, and there needs to be different voices because people learn from different people. And so I just want to keep my heart pure in that. And back to the good treasure. That's what the good's going to come out. And I think God honors that. I've seen God do more with that than what I think I could have. I would have tried to go the fast route, just like, getting the numbers and doing it, whatever. I think that's what's kind of led to the longevity of this, is that the integrity has stayed the same, honoring people and their stories, and just not trying to do it just for a number, but do it for like a true impact on someone's life.
Let me just say, I think that's a word. That's a word for like people that are listening, because you can do that on any level. Like, it's not like, oh, you just have to be in the spotlight to be trying to do things to please man, or to try to like get the likes or the clicks or whatever, and to look at something and say like, oh, I'm not doing that anymore because people didn't seem to like it because they didn't respond in that way. But no, like, what is pleasing to God, and what is, and the why, back to the kind of that why you're doing it, I think is so important. So I think that's a word for everybody.
So
Man looks at the outward appearance, but God.
That's so true.
That's
So
good.
true.
That's good. All right. So we're going to end. I want to end this the way that we do birthdays in our family. And it started with your friend group. So you brought this to our family from your friend group. And I love it. And it's always a special time because this is like a birthday. This is a 300th episode. So the question is, what are you leaving behind and what are you taking with you?
So good. I love this question. So unique with podcasting too, of like, that kind of makes me have to think about it a little bit. I think leaving behind is kind of like what I just said, the need, which hasn't been a thing for me, but it's like been a thing in my past, not just with the podcast, but in other areas of life where you just feel that need to like stay at a level or whatever. And just leave behind the striving. Like, there's no striving in this. This is something that I love doing. I feel proud of. I feel like it's so pure and been so beautiful. And I just want to leave behind any of that striving in a negative way. Like, there's so many things I look forward to and things I want to work towards and things that I'm genuinely excited to work towards, but not from a place of striving, like from a place of making more impact in a good way. So leaving behind any of the unwanted pressure. And two, leaving behind, I used to like overly prepare for things, and now I just prepare like my heart more so. I just recently got to interview Priscilla Shire, who was a guest that I had wanted to come on the podcast for 6 years.
I can attest. Sadie has been trying to get Priscilla on the podcast for years.
Yes. And she loves me. I will say, it's not like she was like not doing it.
No.
She's just super picky with her yeses and nos. And she happened to be on a press run. So she was doing some podcast interviews. And I was like, yes. But like, if this would have been year 2 or 3 of podcasting and Priscilla Shire was going to be on, all week, I would be reading every Priscilla Shire book. I would be listening to every sermon. I would be studying as much as I possibly could and just cramming for this like one interview moment. And I think I probably spent 10 minutes like truly sitting down, because I was like, I know what I want to ask her. Like, I just felt steady in that, solid in that. I'm like, I've listened to so many of her sermons. I feel like I got the gauge of who I know who she is. I know what she puts out there. There are certain questions that I think would be really impactful for me to even hear, for other people. I watched the movie, which I did watch the movie, so that was a little bit longer. And then I spent about 10 minutes going, okay, this is what I want to ask her. And just the ease I felt and the comments about, and our conversation was amazing. You know, then I wasn't sitting there overthinking what's next. I just got to listen to what she was saying and continue on. So leaving behind any unwanted pressure.
Okay, I want to say something in that too, because like one thing that this is a bit behind the scenes, I guess, for your guests that have been on, if you're listening, you've ever been a guest on Sadie's podcast, or for those of you who are listening that like see her joy and her excitement, like that is so genuine. When Sadie will call me and be like, you're not going to believe who I get to interview tomorrow. Like she gets so excited for who's going to be on. And it's not just like the famous people. It's like, oh, I get to talk to this person tomorrow. And I can see that genuine joy in you. And you put that, of course, in front of the camera, and people are maybe like, "Oh, yeah, she's doing that for the camera." No, that is not. Out. She does. She gets so excited.
More off camera than on camera.
She does.
Actually, before Priscilla got on, like I could see her on the screen when I walked in. I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And I just got so excited when I walked in. I was like, I wish I was on video so people really knew like how excited
Sadie
I get for these conversations.
To get to have these conversations.
I love it. And then I'm taking with me, this year we have had so many conversations with just like friends like Lydia and Reeves, Luis and Brittany, just like really cool conversations with people in our life who have amazing stories, even more than the years past. And I want to take more of that with me, just that authenticity of real life stories happening right now. And we have tested out some live audience moments of having people in the room, getting feedback. I love that. I definitely want to take that with me. That's where I feel like we're going to next, is like having people in the room doing some kind of live audiencing. We've teased it. We are working on it for people listening. We want to make that an amazing experience and continue building that community around it, which would be awesome.
I love it. That sounds like fun. You're just getting started, girly.
That's right. Just getting started.
Congrats on
Thanks,
on
boo.
300.
Love you.
All right, I've got one more scripture that just came to mind this morning as I was thinking about and praying about this conversation. And I don't even know where this fits, but I'm just going to read it to you because it was something that just made me think of you and made me think of what you're doing here. So this is 2 Peter 1, starting in verse 5. For this reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue, and virtue with knowledge, and knowledge with self-control, and self-control with steadfastness, and steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly love and affection. I'm getting emotional. And steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they keep you from being ineffective, unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. For whoever lacks these qualities is so nearsighted that he is blind, having forgotten that he was cleansed from his former sins. Therefore, brothers, be all the more diligent to confirm your calling and election, for if you practice these qualities, you will never fall. For in this way, there will be richly provided for you an entrance into the eternal kingdom of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. So I think you live that scripture so beautifully and so well, and you help others to live it through this podcast. So
thank you. That's so
great
sweet.
job, baby.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here with me through all 300.
I love you.
If I ever get to 300, can we do this for me? It's been so
yes,
crazy.
we will. Yes, we
Run
will.
it back.
It'll be longer than 6 years for me to get there, but maybe like 15 years down the road.
Steadfastness, perseverance.
That's right.
Perfect.
That's right.